Today's story begins by showing a couple whose faces immediately gave away that their intentions were far from good. In fact, their plan for today was to rob a grocery store, and they had come fully prepared. But even after looting the entire store, they were not satisfied because the woman noticed a box behind the cashier and insisted on opening it. The cashier had been pleading from the start that there was nothing in that box worth their interest, so they shouldn't open it. But blinded by greed, the couple went ahead and opened it. That's when the sound of gunfire rang out. As the scene shifts, we find ourselves in a deserted forest where a frightened, lonely girl has been wandering for who knows how many days, hungry and alone. There was no one around her. Now she spots a small wooden hut ahead. She immediately goes inside. There, she finds a bag full of food. She begins eating whatever she can get her hands on to quell her hunger. Just then, a terrifying sound of footsteps is heard outside. Someone is approaching. Out of fear, she hides under the bed. After a while, a person enters the hut. They are carrying a club. They quietly take their bag of food and leave without a sound. The girl, still under the bed, stays silent out of fear. After some time, she decides she must leave. She tries to run, but suddenly bumps into the same person, whose name is Tom. However, he does not harm her. Instead, he helps her. Samantha, the girl, apologizes to him because she had taken food from Tom's bag. She had been hungry for 2 days. In fact, her car had broken down. When they got stranded midway, her husband had gone to a nearby petrol station to get help, but he still hadn't returned. Coincidentally, Tom's car was also broken down. In fact, he had been stuck in this forest for 3 days. Hearing this, Samantha panicked and said she had to leave to look for her husband. Maybe he had come back. So Tom went with her, but there was no one there. The two of them left a note behind, took some warm clothes, and returned to the small wooden hut. But she still couldn't understand why her husband had left her alone in such a remote forest. She could have gone with him. But hearing this, Samantha revealed that she was pregnant, so perhaps her husband had left her alone to fetch help. After hearing this, Tom told her to sleep on the bed while he decided to sleep on the floor. In the middle of the night, Samantha was jolted awake by a terrifying dream, and she woke up very early in the morning. But looking around, she couldn't see Tom anywhere. When she went outside, she found a girl with white hair unconscious on the ground. She quickly lifted the girl and brought her inside the hut. Meanwhile, Tom was getting some fuel from his car, apparently to pour it into Samantha's car so that the two of them could leave the forest. The white-haired girl regained consciousness. This was Judy, the same woman from the couple who had robbed the grocery store. But how had she ended up here? Seeing Samantha, Judy thought she might be some suspicious woman, and that this place belonged to her. So Samantha explained the whole situation, but Judy still didn't believe her. In anger, she stormed out of the hut. At that moment, Tom was returning with the fuel when suddenly 2 gunshots rang out. He was so terrified that the fuel can slipped from his hands. He screamed, "Is anyone there? Is anyone around?" But there was no one there, so Tom returned. He saw an unfamiliar girl with Samantha. It was actually Judy. Judy explained that she had left her boyfriend after an argument, and he had abandoned her here alone. But now she needed to go back home. Hearing this, Tom agreed to let her stay, but only if she helped with the chores. The next day, as Samantha and Judy talked, they became friends. But Tom's problems didn't end. He noticed that no matter how far he tried to leave this place, strangely, he always ended up back at the same hut. This terrified him. So he quickly returned to the 2 girls and said, "This place isn't right. We have to get out of here. But first, I need to know, where exactly were you trying to go? And where is this place?" Samantha said her husband had told her it was New Hampshire. Judy said it was toward Dakota. And Tom said he had been on the route to Los Angeles. Hearing this, all 3 realized they were in a frightening predicament. So Tom decided that the next morning they would go as far as they could, hoping to find help or discover a way out of this place. That night, both Judy and Tom had very strange dreams, as if someone was injecting them. Samantha seemed to be screaming in pain somewhere, and she had had the same kind of dream before. In any case, in the morning, they packed their things and began walking. As they walked, Samantha and Judy talked. Samantha revealed parts of her past. For example, her mother had died shortly after she was born. From then on, she had grown up in an orphanage. Suddenly, Samantha tripped over something. At the same time, a large bundle of money fell out of her bag. Seeing this, Tom was astonished and quickly asked, "Where did all this money come from?" In response, Judy said it was her own saving, which she had been keeping with her boyfriend. But when she left, she had taken the money with her. Just then, Samantha's attention was drawn to the object Judy had tripped over. It was a handle. When Tom broke the handle with his club, they discovered it was actually a German bunker. Inside were various war supplies and some canned food, all marked with Nazi symbols. Samantha explained that her father had fought in the war, so such items had occasionally come to their home. Tom brought all the items outside, and the three of them stepped out. But the problem was, they had somehow returned to the same cabin again. They thought they were walking straight, but nothing seemed to be working normally here. In the next scene, the three were having their dinner. The two girls talked quietly. Judy confessed to Samantha that she stole because she had no other options. She wasn't educated. Samantha asked her, could she show the stolen money again? She had never seen so much money in her life. Judy happily took out the cash and showed it. Seeing the money, Samantha smiled. According to her, the notes were marked 184, meaning they were future currency. But Judy said, no, she was from 1984. Samantha said, according to her, it was the year 1964. Everything seemed strange. Two women in the same place, yet both had come from different timelines. When Tom arrived, they asked him, which year was he from? Tom replied, 2011. Hearing this, both girls shared their entire stories. At first, Tom thought it was a joke, but realizing the seriousness in their words, he understood. There was definitely something terribly wrong here. Just then, suddenly, gunshots rang out from outside. Now the question arose, who was firing repeatedly in this forest? When they looked, they saw an unfamiliar man. He was holding a gun. All three of them needed help, so Tom stepped outside and shouted that they were in danger. But the man began speaking in German. Although they couldn't understand him, Tom realized he was telling him to drop the club. So Tom dropped it. Then what happened? When Tom opened his eyes fully, he saw that all three of them were now captives, and the German man had vanished. They began to understand. Perhaps they had really traveled through time and ended up in another era. All three were prisoners, and the German man was nowhere to be found. Then the oldest Samantha asked, by 2011, has time travel become possible? Tom replied, no, that technology hasn't been developed yet. A little while later, the German man returned and untied Tom. Then he dragged him outside, brutally beat him, and finally tied him to a tree. After that, he entered the hut and stared at the two girls, asking, who are you, and where did you come from? Just then, the German man's eyes fell on the locket hanging around Judy's neck. He began questioning her about it, and only Samantha knew German, so she explained. It was a locket given to Judy by her mother, and Samantha had a similar locket as well. Hearing this, the German man, in anger, took out a similar locket from around his own neck. The woman's photo inside that locket was an exact match to Samantha's mother. He then took the two girls outside. Samantha asked Tom, do you have a locket like this? Tom replied, no, I don't have anything like that. Meanwhile, the stranger had forgotten that Tom had actually untied his own rope. In the next moment, Tom was in the same position of being bound, just as he had tied the three of them earlier. The three of them were now stunned, as the full picture of the mystery was slowly becoming clear. Samantha said, the woman in the man's locket, that's my mother. Tom didn't want to believe it, but then Judy said, the woman in the picture, she's my grandmother. Hearing this, Tom's mind was blown. This was when the stranger's identity was revealed. Samantha explained that his name was Hans, and he was actually Samantha's own father. But the shocks didn't end there. When Samantha asked Judy her birth date, Judy said June 3rd, 1964. It was the same date, the day Samantha's mother had died giving birth. And who was that child? That child was none other than Judy herself. In other words, Judy was the baby born at the very moment Samantha's mother died, and she had traveled from the future back in time to her own mother's past. Now a shadow of sorrow had settled over the entire cabin. The events had twisted so drastically that everyone felt dizzy and overwhelmed. When Samantha learned that her husband had actually died in the war, she broke down in tears and ran out of the cabin. But the mystery did not end there. Outside, Tom told Judy that her mother had actually been a thief. Judy refused to believe it, insisting she didn't have such a locket. Tom explained that his mother had a similar locket, but it was still at home. Tom revealed Her mother had been a thief, and together with her husband Kevin, they used to rob gas stations in the city. But one day, she had killed her own husband, and for that crime, she had been sentenced to death. It was a bitter but true story, one that Judy couldn't bear, and she left the cabin in shock. Sitting outside, Samantha was joined by her daughter Judy. The atmosphere had completely changed. Samantha, upon realizing she would die giving birth, felt as if her world had shattered. But at the same time, she was comforted knowing that her daughter Judy would survive, and her grandmother would raise her. But then Judy revealed that her grandmother had treated her cruelly, starving her and abusing her. So she had run away from home at a very young age. Hearing this, Samantha broke down in tears. She returned to the cabin and explained everything to Hans, her father, and began trying to free him. But Tom stopped her, warning that Hans could be dangerous. Samantha insisted her father wouldn't harm her, but before Hans could be freed, he disappeared, taking his gun and clothes with him. Meanwhile, Samantha remembered that terrible nightmare, where she died giving birth while her husband was away at war and the ambulance arrived too late. Tom also revealed that he had seen the same type of dream, where he killed his abusive father in the dream, then shot himself. Finally, it was Judy's turn. She revisited the memory of the day she had been sentenced to death. In other words, all three of them now knew that they were going to die, and they even knew exactly how they would die. The three of them knew they would die in the future, but they hadn't died yet. In other words, they still had the chance to change the past. That's why Tom immediately took them to the German bunker. He believed that all these events had started after Hans's death, so saving him first was critical. Samantha revealed her father Hans had died on May 14th in Poland during an airstrike, and today was also May 14th, and where they were standing was Poland. In other words, they had a chance. Tom reasoned if Hans didn't die, Samantha's mother would not remarry. Consequently, her husband would not be at the battlefield, but at home. He could then take Samantha to the hospital during labor, so Tom immediately set out to find Hans. Hans was busy trying to connect the radio in the cabin, but it was broken. When Samantha tried to tell him about the airstrike, Hans started running before even hearing her. Tom tried to stop him, but a terrible mistake happened. Hans fired his gun, and the bullet struck Judy directly. Hans escaped, and Tom and Samantha rushed the injured Judy back to the cabin. Tom panicked, because if Judy died, he himself would never be born. He said, "I'll stop him by any means necessary." He set out again to catch Hans. Meanwhile, Samantha was desperately trying to save her daughter. Even though Tom found Hans, the man kept slipping away from him. But Tom noticed, no matter how far Hans ran, he always returned to the same cabin. So Tom returned to the cabin, and now the two of them faced each other. Hans fired many shots at Tom, but not a single bullet touched him, because Tom's existence was gradually fading away. Just like Judy's life was slowly slipping away, Tom's existence too was vanishing. Finally, the moment came when Tom completely disappeared, because Judy had died. Meanwhile, Samantha was furious at her father. He had destroyed not only his own life, but the lives of future generations. After all this, Hans finally believed Samantha, but it was too late. Nothing could be fixed anymore. Russian warplanes appeared in the sky. Both of them ran for cover, but the bombs had already begun falling. Samantha was injured. Hans scooped her up and carried her into the bunker. Gradually, Samantha's existence began to fade, because Hans had survived this time. The moment in history when he had previously died, he no longer died. In other words, history had begun to realign itself. The scene then shifted back to the time where the story had originally begun. But now, many things had changed. Judy returned to the grocery store, but this time, she was completely different. An educated, wealthy, mature woman. As she left the store, she saw Kevin, and he was planning a robbery again, but this time, he was with another girl, meaning Judy and Kevin never ended up together. As a result, Tom was never born, because Judy was no longer the same girl from her old life. Meanwhile, Samantha was still alive. In the next scene, Samantha held her father's ashes in her hands and bid him farewell with respect. Kevin's new girlfriend was robbing everything, but as before, her greed didn't end. Her eyes fell upon the box behind the cashier. When she tried to open it, the cashier warned, "If you put your hand in there, nothing will ever be right again." But she didn't listen, and with the sound of gunfire, everything came to an end. And that is where the story concludes.